What's up guys, Asian here again with another theory crafting video, and today we're going to be going over our magicka Nightblade and race choice. So this question has popped up several times in my Nightblade video, my magicka Nightblade video, as well as I've seen comments on Reddit and the official forums kind of asking which race is better for magicka Nightblade, Altmer or Dunmer. And so this video hopes to answer that question today. Let's go to kind of the origins of this question. Since Morrowind was released in this past June, a lot of magicka DPS have swapped over to using elemental blockade with a lightning staff as opposed to a fire staff. Previous to Morrowind, back in Homestead, magicka Nightblades would use fire blockade instead of lightning blockade, and so that change to the lightning blockade kind of asked the question, well, now we have both shock and fire damage as a magicka Nightblade, so are Dunmer still the best choice for magicka Nightblade, or are Altmer better for magicka Nightblades? So that's kind of where the origin of this question comes from. So our only source of shock damage is really Blockade of Storms, and for our, as well as I guess light attacks from your lightning bar, and for fire damage you have the light attacks from your front bar, and then you also have your Destruction Staff ultimate here. And if you're using a shock damage enchant, then that's another source of shock damage as well, which is affected by the Altmer racial passives. I'm just going to really quick compare the racial passives between the Dark Elf and the High Elves. So this first passive here, Ashlander for Dark Elves, that doesn't really matter too much. It's basically just a kind of a fluff passive, I like to call it. It basically increases your experience gain with dual wield as a Dark Elf, and decreases the damage you take from lava by 50%, which can be kind of useful, but ultimately it's not really that big of a deal. But these other three passives are kind of what you want to compare to an Altmer. So Dynamic increases magicka and stamina by 6%, Resist Flame increases magicka by 3%, and Flame Resistance by 2079, which works out to be 3% resistances. And Destructive Ancestry, which is kind of the crux behind this whole question, is Dunmer gets 7% extra flame damage and 2% frost and shock damage. Now, if we swap over to an Altmer, here, again, Highborn, we don't really care about. It just increases experience gain with Destruction Staff and total experience gain, so I guess you can grind your Altmer a little bit faster than a Dunmer. It just doesn't really make much of a difference. You have 9% extra magicka regen. Well, that's something that Dunmer lack. Dark Elves don't have a magic regen passive, so that's kind of where the Altmer have a step up on them. They have 10% max magicka compared to a Dunmer's 9%. That 1% really doesn't really make or break you, in my opinion, but it's something to take note of. And then this is where everything, again, where the crux of the argument lands. Increases your flame, frost, and shock damage by 4%. So basically, if you want to compare the Dunmer to the Altmer, Dunmer get 3% extra flame damage at the expense of a loss of 2% frost and shock damage. Conversely, you can think of it as the Altmer have 2% extra shock and frost damage at the expense of 3% extra flame damage. So that's kind of where everything kind of falls to, this last passive here. Does this sort of balancing of elemental damage types offset any sort of DPS difference that we might see? Does this make the Altmer better than the Dunmer, or vice versa? So we're going to try to answer that. So what we're going to do is we are going to do two parses, one as a Dunmer and one as an Altmer, and we're just going to compare our two parses. Everything else is going to stay exactly the same. Gear, CP, skill points, everything is going to remain the same. The only thing we're going to be changing is our racial passives. So Our disclaimer, like all of our other theory crafting videos that involve parses, this is only one parse for each race, so we're not really going to be able to make any definitive conclusions here. We're not going to be able to say for certain that one race is better than the other. We're going to need to collect a lot more data points to get an average before we can sort of make any conclusions there. But at least with these two parses, we'll be able to get sort of an idea of if there is a very large disparity, as well as if there is a large disparity, how big is it, and kind of where what is affected by the change in our racial passives. So the two things we're going to be looking at here are going to kind of be sustain, more or less, even though Magicka Nightblades do have pretty good sustain already, just because Altmer have that extra 9% regen, as well as our final parse numbers. So let's go ahead and get started with our parses. Alright, so that is our Dunmer parse. Take a look at our numbers here. 37.36k. Because Combat Metrics doesn't save fights when we log out, we're going to just save the fight here to our combat log, make sure that's saved. There it is. So that's kind of the number that we are going to compare with our Altmer. So we're going to go ahead and log out to character select and race change over to a high elf. Race change to high elf. Keep our appearance exactly the same because we are lazy. And we're going to go ahead and log back in. One thing to keep in mind if you guys haven't done a race change before is that when you do a race change, your racial passives are completely reset. You are refunded those skill points that you put in, and you're basically completely cleared, so you have to go back and put your points back into your racial passives. So do keep that in mind if you do decide to race change. You're going to have to redo your passives. You do get the skill points back though, so don't think that you're just going to end up losing those skill points. Now we're just going to get our ultimate back up. Now we're going to do another parse. So remember the number to beat is 37,360. Oh, come on. Almost there. Hopefully that'll get us up to a point where the potion... Okay, yeah, potion passive will get us up to 250. Alright, so here we go. Alright, so there we go. That is the High Elf Parse. And we're looking at 36,620. So if you go back and look at our previous parse here, 37,360. So that is a difference of about 700 DPS. So why don't we go ahead and take a closer look at where these changes are coming from. So we can see here that in terms of lightning damage, shock damage, we have Blockade of Storms, charged weapon, light attack from our back bar, and concussion also counts, although it's so low that we might as well ignore concussion. So we only have 3 sources of lightning shock damage here. And at the same time, we only have 3 sources of fire damage here. We have our light attack from our front bar, fiery rage, Valkan Scoria, and burning, but again, just like concussion, it does so little damage that we might as well ignore it. So if we take a look here and we just add up the percentages that each one makes up, we have 10.1, 6.6, 5.3, add that together. That gives us 901, 11 plus 11 is 22% compared to Scoria, which is 3.9. That's 10.4. 10.4 is 25.2. So we are getting roughly about 3 to 4% more fire damage out from our fire abilities than we are from our shock abilities. So that's kind of where that disparity lies. So it seems like if we're just looking at that, Dunmer do seem to win out just because we are getting a higher percentage of fire damage out. So this is the Dunmer parse. And again, if we take a look at our numbers, 3.7, 9.4, that's 13.1, 13.1, 27.5. We have 12.5 and 10.6, that gives us 23.1. So we're still higher in terms of percentage of damage that comes from flame damage. So it seems like for magicka Nightblade, Dunmer still wins out, even though we have swapped over to Blockade of Storms instead of Blockade of Fire. Even with that shock damage enchant on our front bar, we are still doing more fire damage overall compared to shock damage, assuming that of course we are using the Destro Ultimate on our front bar instead of our back bar. If we are using Destro Ultimate on our back bar, we have Thunderous Rage instead of Fiery Rage, and obviously Altmer would probably pull ahead because that difference is very small. However, as you guys can see here, the difference is only right here. It's not that big. If we hop over to our tried and true math calculator, if we hop over to R here, we have, remember to calculate the percent difference is always going to be your final. In this case, we'll use our Dunmer as our base, so our final is going to be our Altmer parse, so 36,620 minus our initial, which is 37,360. You want that, and then you divide that by your initial, which is 37,360, and you want to multiply that by 100, so we get a percentage. So we're looking at about a 2% difference between Altmer and Dunmer, at least for this particular parse. Now, if we continue to do more parses, I'm sure that that number might go down or might come up. We'll end up reaching an average, but right now it seems like Dunmer wins out over Altmer by about 2% margin there in terms of DPS. However, you guys saw the parses. You can still pull very good DPS as an Altmer or as a Dunmer, so that really doesn't really impact you in endgame unless you are one of those people who really has to push as much as you possibly can from your class. If you are a min-maxer to the core, this is the only real situation where you're going to want to use a race change. I can't justify spending $15 to change race only for a 2% difference in DPS. That, of course, is up to you. It is a personal decision for you to make. If you feel that it is worth spending that money for the race change token, then by all means go ahead. But it is something to keep in mind that we only have a 2% difference here. So that's it for this video. Hope you found it informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.